Okay, so the next definition is frame. It says see door frame is what they're talking to us about. So it's going to be a pretty broad definition, but let's talk about it. So some terms that I've seen kicked around for frame are jam or buck, sub buck. I've heard that as well. Really depends on the background of where the person is coming from. Are they commercial in nature? Are they residential in their background? But a frame is, you know, what the door hangs in, or I suppose the piece of glass sits in. You know, the frame, the structure that surrounds the door on at least, I suppose, two sides for sure, usually three, sometimes four sides. I've seen, we've done four-sided frames because they're going to take that unit and put it into a hole that they've cut in the side of a shipping container. Two jambs only, sure. I've seen hollow metal doors. I've seen wood doors done on frames in restroom applications where they're literally toilet partition doors, so there's no header. But then obviously two jambs and a header. So jam, do you need a jam as well? You know, or do you need a frame? To me, the jam is the vertical sides of the frame. The header is the header, the hinge jam and the strike jam. So I don't really think of jam as referring to the frame in its entirety. When it comes to frames, it's basically a piece of steel that has been sheared to size and then bent to accommodate the requirements. And off the top of my head, you're going to have double rabbet frames, single rabbet frames, cased opening frames, thermal break frames, communicating frames would be another way. You're going to have slip over frames, two-piece frames. Obviously, those applications use, those frame types used for single acting doors, double acting doors, Dutch doors, you know, whatever you're putting in there. So the frame really focuses on the piece that allows the door to hang. To me, the frame is a component of a total opening when there's one required. There may not be a frame required. You might be putting a hollow metal door into a channel iron, structural channel iron that's already in the wall, but it's doing the job of the frame. You're just not providing one. And when it comes to the options and availability of frames, you're going to be thinking about what's the width of the opening. Okay, 3 foot, 4 foot, 2 foot 6, whatever it is. The height, 6'8", 7'0", 10'0", whatever it is. Then on frames, you can deal with different depths. That's referred to as the jam depth. You are going to be thinking about the base material. Is it the typical 16 gauge? Or is it 14 gauge? Or is it 12 gauge? Or is it 20 gauge? It could be, 18 gauge. Are you dealing with steel, cold rolled steel? Are you dealing with galvanized? Are you, and if yes, which type of galvanized? Are you dealing with stainless steel? Are you dealing with a fiberglass frame? You can have that as well. You're also going to be dealing with the particular dimensions of the frame itself. We'll take a cross-section of a frame that will, actually, we'll just do it right now. I was going to say we'll take a cross-section of a frame and we'll name all the different parts. I'm going to use this masonry. Well, no, I'll keep the drywall. So frames are going to have different parts defined, and this part is important. All of the parts are important. That what I'm about to say next is important. That's called the return. Fun fact, if you've got a fire-rated opening, your drywall has to penetrate into that a minimum amount, and shoot, I don't remember, is it 3/4 inch? Look at NFPA 80 for that. Your drywall has to penetrate in a certain amount. Generally, the return is not something that you tweak. There are times when you may need to tweak that dimension. I can see a requirement to have a particular jam depth, but your wall thickness is weird. It's unusual. It doesn't follow the generally wall thickness plus 1 inch is jam depth. Sometimes it's wall thickness plus 7/8 is jam depth. So there could be a reason to tweak that dimension, but it's always going to be standard is 1/2 inch in masonry frames, unless your jam depth is 5 7/8. What I've seen there is that unless your jam depth is 5 3/4, generally these returns will be 7/16, giving you a 4 7/8 wall thickness. So they're 1/2 inch unless they're 7/16. However, that really shouldn't matter too much. You shouldn't have to think about that too much, in the sense that you're dealing with probably a wall thickness, and then you want to make sure that your frame snugly fits over the wall that you've ordered the frame for. So if you've got a 4 7/8 wall, 3 5/8 metal stud, 2 layers of 5/8 drywalls, 4 7/8, you really don't care so much what the jam depth is. It'll be 5 3/4 or 4 7/8. So, moving on. This is called the face of the frame. Some people will call it the profile. Here's my profile. That's the profile. It's 2 inch, but it can be other dimensions. When it comes to hollow metal frames, there's always a minimum dimension and a maximum dimension. And those minimum and maximum dimensions are governed by the physical limitations of generally the press brake that is putting the bend on the sheet steel. So it's kind of fun if you've got a piece of steel that might be, 8 51/64 wide, whatever the dimension is. And the operator will put that sheet of steel into the machine, and he'll hit a floor pedal, and that big piece of metal will flip upwards because he's put that first bend on it. So there's going to be minimum and maximum values. So if you wanted a profile face of like 5/8, they're probably going to tell you they can't do it. I think the smallest I've seen is 3/4. The point being is be mindful that there are hard limits on that. 2 inch. Other common sizes are 1 1/4, not unusual. Some people will want a narrower face because they kind of want a little cleaner look, maybe less hollow metal, maybe more aluminum in what it looks like. Back in the old days, we would stock jams in 2 inch, 1 3/4, 1.5 inch, 1 1/4, 1 inch. That means that we could tweak the profile of the frame when contending with an existing opening. Customer says, I need the OD of the frame to be 39 inch, but I need a 7-foot door. I need a 3-foot door for compliance. Great. I got 1.5 inch profile on the jams. Perfect. You do have to be mindful of what you might be attaching to that when your jam gets smaller. And I'm really referring to a header. You might get into trouble with attaching a shoe from a closer. And that can be wider. And the only reason you might tweak it wider is, again, you're contending with a rough opening size. These are called rabbets. This happens to be an unequal rabbet frame. This is 1 15/16. This is 1 9/16. 1 3/4 doors will fit here. 1 3/8 doors will fit here. You can have them equal rabbet. You can have them single rabbet where that line will come straight across here. You can have them cased where it's completely flat all the way across. All of this is the stop. This is the soffit, and that's the stop face. Rabbet, profile, return. This is a drywall frame. The only difference is that it has a back bend return right here, and that's to make it easier to slide this over drywall without tearing the paper face of the drywall. Sorry, my camera's gone a little limp. So the back bend return is nice to slide that over drywall and not tear the face of the drywall. So those are the basic anatomical definitions of a cross section. Also, when it comes to frame, you're going to probably want to have a conversation about anchors, and I've got lots of definitions on anchors that exist. Generally, when it comes to frames, they will be 1 gauge size, 1 standard increment in gauge heavier than the door. So if you've got an 18 gauge door, you'll have a 16 gauge frame. That's typical. If you've got a 16 gauge door, go with a 14 gauge frame. The heavier the door, the thicker the steel you want on the frame, because that's really what's doing all the work. In particular, that top hinge is really what's doing all the work. I like to suggest that customers consider galvanized. It's really an inexpensive insurance policy. Galvanized doors last far, far longer. and not wipe coat galvanized. Galvanized doors last far, far longer, and I like to contend that why spend all the extra money on aluminum? Go with 16 gauge hollow metal doors, full cutouts, narrow profile on the jambs, galvanized, everything's welded. The hinge plates in aluminum frames are just attached with screws. You can have the look of aluminum with the lower cost, greater durability of steel. I believe that through and through. So since we are basically doing this definition and all of them a cappella, let's just switch to the screen view and take a closer look at a Curry's technical manual. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. Okay, here we are taking a look at the frame, C door frame. So let's scroll up to the D's in the glossary. Let's see what that looks like. Door frame, an assembly of members surrounding and supporting door or doors. Awesome. That makes perfect sense to me. All right, so let's go back to our page. Let's pull up a technical manual here, and we'll go to manufacturers. I said Curry's, so let's take a look at Curry's. Well, I really wish I had my old Kiwani technical manual. Flush and glazed single door. Okay, specialty section. Well, let's take a look at that. Sounds fun. See if there's anything in here frame-wise. Specialty doors. And obviously your frames can be prepped for any of the hardware that you're going to see commercially. You're going to have them prepared in either a knockdown fashion or in a fashion that would be one piece. And there are different ways to specify how you would set them up as one piece. And welding is also a definition that I've done. You can take this is a single rabbet frame, by the way. You can take the header and put the tabs through the slots and bend them over with pliers and a hammer and be done with it. You could also do that, and then you could tack weld the inside of this and be done with it. You can do those two, and then you can weld the face of this and then grind it, sand it, hopefully not Bondo it, and then have a full smooth face to that. You can also take jam stock and miter saw it and then full depth weld that. That means you're going to run a weld on the entire backside of the frame. Your manufacturer's price list will list those different options for welding. You're going to want to be sure that you're doing it the way the client wants to see it. I did not mention that 5/8 is the typical projection of the stop. That is normal. Sometimes you'll see it 3/4. You'll never really see it less than that. This again is called the soffit. This is what parallel arm brackets or rim exit strikes are attached to. And if you're attaching hardware, you might want to consider a hardware compatible piece of weather stripping or a bracket that you can attach your hardware to such that the weather stripping sneaks under it. Here's an example of an existing opening anchor for a frame. Let's go to the shop manual. Curry's has a shop manual. Kiwani did too. I would recommend that if you're a hollow metal shop and maybe one that's newer or one that is growing, you might want to take a look at their shop manual because it's 100 pages of, hey man, here's how you do it. And yeah, you better believe initially I was learning from the shop manual, the Kiwani shop manual. So here's a floor plan. Tools to use. I'm probably going to dive into this someday. Welding clamps. Yeah, Irwin makes, we probably stock them. These are welding clamps. It's a vice grip, the name that everyone knows, but for welding. Knockdown frame welding, making sure it's square. Doors have to be true, plumb, level, and square, and it's all got to do with the frame. They're showing you here how to weld. Really great. I'm gonna do a step-by-step in this manual. I can see that happening. Yeah, I love this. Okay, so I would definitely recommend getting into this because it's talking about the actual details of how you produce items. Piece parts are here, etc., etc., and I've not even scrolled through half of the catalog yet. The shop manual. Yeah, really good. This is all for the distributor. Let's take a look at their older tech manual. Borrowed lights, obviously you're using jam sections of stick material is what we would call it, just 10-foot, 3-inch long pieces of blank jam material. You're really only limited by what you can draw on a piece of paper with this stuff. We've done some fun stuff back in the old days of welding very large side lights, borrowed lights. We did oh boy, I did a curved borrowed light wall for a hospital that was so big it had to be made in 3 sections, like 3 20-foot sections. But you get the concept. This 5/8 dimension, if you've got a UL requirement, you might need to get into the 3/4. I don't see a reference to that at all, if that's even still applicable. Yeah. That is a cased opening frame. This is probably going to be for a hospital application where you've got rescue hardware installed. Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, rescue frame. There you go. Rescue frame. You can do a lot of fun stuff when it comes with frames. Obviously, running conduit for power transfer hardware. You're going to want to really, really think about, if a client orders from you the frame and there's an electric strike, you might want to upsell them on welding in some conduit into the throat. And because if he gives that frame to the mason, he's going to blame you for not mentioning it. This is fun. What is this for? I know what it's for. Electric deadbolts with a key override. Jam lock 2-inch. Well, it doesn't have to be an electric deadbolt, but this is some sort of a lock that you're going to install into the jam. Oh, that's fun. What is all of this? And one thing that's nice about these technical manuals is they give a distributor an idea of what can be done. This is probably referring to some sort of conduit that's here for some sort of lock that I'm not, it's not ringing a bell. What's going on here? Whatever this EJ4, EJ8, EJ12, it's probably 4, 8, 12 wire prep. I don't know what's going here. Magnetic lock. Yeah. So frames can become rather complicated when it comes to the preparation. So what I like to do is I define, well, what I think we'll do is, you're showing a conduit prep. Yeah, reinforcements for different closer applications. PA mount, top jam or pull regular arm mount, full sleeve, half sleeve is what we'd call this. Yeah, full sleeve, half sleeve. Yeah, technical manuals are great. A good document to use if you're training someone as well. Let's switch back to the camera view and we'll just talk about a standard way by which to declare how to write your door frame. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. Now when I write out a frame, if I'm going to order, or if I'm going to specify a frame to the client, I'll always start with maybe the tag number, and then the quantity, and then the width, and then the height, and I'll put the jam depth, and sometimes I also put the throat size as well, because I literally want to leave no room for anyone assuming what I want. I will declare the profile. Sometimes I'll declare the stop dimension if there's something that is important to know about that. When I write that out, if I put it in the long description of the item of the frame, if there's a reason that the client needs to know it's 5/8 or 3/4, I'll put that there. Then sometimes I'll put the soffit dimension if that's necessary. If they're going to be mounting a piece of hardware to it, I'll declare that as well. You'll always put the gauge of the steel, 18 through 12 gauge. You'll put the type of steel. Is it cold rolled? Is it galvanized? Is it stainless steel? Etc. What I like to do is I like to then put my hardware preparations, because I'm thinking about the steps in terms of how a shop would go about it. A factory is going to do it maybe differently, but if I am going to take a frame off the shelf, parts off the shelf, I'm going to prep them for hardware first. I'll put my hardware preps. Then I'm going to put my reinforcements. I'll reinforce it next, and then I'll weld it last. And then I'll mention my anchors. I usually don't mention a finish. I would sure mention a finish if there's discussion about, is it painted? I might put prime coat, a gray prime coat, but generally not. If you felt like doing that, I would go 16 gauge cold rolled steel CRS primed. So I'll put my hinge preps, my hardware preparations, my reinforcements. Then I'll define how I'm welding it, full depth welded and ground smooth. And then I'll put my anchors. I will put my hand and then dash the manufacturer. But sometimes what I need to do is to declare in the hardware prep to what locations. So I might write that whole frame and say to SECO standard locations. So if it's an 8 foot tall, SECO's got a standard for 8 foot tall. When it comes to the reinforcements, probably going to call out, for the preparations, I need it to be prepped for a power transfer intermediate pivot. I'll call out the model number per attached template, that kind of thing. When it comes to the reinforcements, I'll usually say half sleeve closer for half sleeve closer reinforcement, meaning they can do a parallel arm mount or they can do a top jam mount if it's a reverse bevel. If it's going to be a left hand or a right hand, they can do a regular arm or a parallel arm mount if it's left or right, and then half sleeve would be top jam or parallel arm if it's left reverse or right hand reverse. So I'll usually declare what that closer is as well. There are times when the anchors come into the conversation that you need to declare something unusual, like maybe an adjustable floor anchor or what's called a floor stilt if you need to build one side of it up off a little bit higher for whatever reason. And then again, the hand. Put your tag number there. Sometimes, believe it or not, factories have to be told, believe it or not, I don't have one here. I used to walk through the shop and take everyone's black magic marker, because when you write in black magic marker on the steel frame, you have to sand that off. It doesn't prime over. You have to actually tell them to not use black magic marker, but not use tape. This tape is not so bad, but the clear adhesive tape, it doesn't just pull off of a hollow metal frame. It pulls off, but in slivers and pieces. So you want to keep that stuff away. Another thing that I like to do when I'm working on a frame is I kind of treat the frame as if it's a finished product. So if I'm cutting it, welding it, prepping it, drilling it, tapping it, whatever I'm doing, I'm not laying all my tools on it. Or, what used to bother me a lot, on our welding tables, there would be a sheet of cardboard. Well, the guy's welding all day, he's grinding all day, he's sanding all day, he's priming all day, and then what ends up happening is there's particulate of the slag on the top of the cardboard. And they're taking these frames and sliding them on and off, and they look like they're used by the time it's done. And while that may be common sense, it's just not common sense to everybody. Back to the marker. Mark on the throat of the frame if you're going to put a tag number or masking tape. And I would suggest that you not use 1 inch, get 2 inch wide. Put that on there so that your marker's not exiting off of the masking tape. I really don't think masking tape's a good idea because those frames can get extremely cold, whatever it might be, and even masking tape has to be pulled off. When it comes to frames and a shop setting, you're going to need heads, you're going to need strike jams, hinge jams, you're going to need blank jams, you're going to want stick material, different depths, maybe different face profiles, a complete suite of reinforcements, complete suite of anchors. You're going to need the tools, you're going to need a chop saw, you're going to want what's a really nice tool to have is a horizontal bandsaw. Those are really nice. The chop saw, extremely loud, extreme dirt, a horizontal, liquid-cooled horizontal bandsaw. That's my first choice all the time for that stuff. You're going to need grinders, and you're going to need the consumables, your grinding pads, your grinding wheels, your spray paint. You're going to want to be fully equipped with the proper equipment when you're welding these frames. I like the Miller 141 welder. I own that one. The 130 might have been its predecessor. Miller's a great tool when it comes to welders. You're going to need gloves. You're going to need you're going to need a helmet. You're going to want an auto darkening helmet. You're going to want ventilation. You're going to want everything to be covered. Nothing exposed. And if you're welding, get hikers have like a fabric that you can pull over your head and cover your neck, because it's ultraviolet that's being produced from the welding radiation, and that is going to give you a sunburn, is the bottom line. So complete proper protection. Ventilation is extremely important. Breathing welding fumes is carcinogenic, period, known to cause sterility. So you want to be completely sure about that. You want all four. You want eye protection, you want ear protection, you want mouth protection, and eye protection. Ear, eye, ventilation, and I think gloves. That's the fourth thing I'm thinking of. You want to be completely equipped for all of that. Yeah, so now back to detailing it all out. That's pretty much everything I said. You'll indicate certainly in there if it's fire rated. That's going to need to be really up front and center. And I have an example of how it would look like in a DHI format. In DHI, the Door Hardware Institute, I would absolutely recommend their courses, because you will learn the industry standard way to define this. This is obviously a pair of doors. Yeah. Yeah, doesn't matter. Pair of doors. So you've got a pair of doors. You've got the from and to information. Oh, I didn't mention that. It's always nice to know to declare the degree of opening. And that is important. That's super important. If you're having the factory prep for a concealed overhead stop, they're going to need to know the degree of opening. Your handing is over here as well. Each leaf 3070, FG for full glass hollow metal door, 3-inch style. This is the door reference, so we're going to come right down here to HMF, hollow metal frame, 5 3/4 jam depth, 2-inch face, 5/8 stop, 2 1/4 soffit, 45-minute fire rated. So the whole battle of when I create a description for a frame, it's this long. And someone who is in the hollow metal industry and has lots of shop experience, they'll understand what to do with that. Like your specialty, your custom houses, the Carp & Steels, the HMFs, people like that will know what you mean. But then there are manufacturers, big manufacturers, your Seicos, your Currys, your Steelcrafts, your Republics, your Meskers, that they're going to want sheets filled out. I refuse to fill those out. I refuse to fill them out until I'm forced to fill them out. Because the people that are doing the entry, the data entry, they're not from a shop setting. They're data entry folks. So sometimes, me saying it's a 5 3/4 jam depth, no, they need you just to give them the code for that. Doesn't mean anything that it's 5 3/4 jam depth. And especially when you're tweaking some sort of value on that, it may not mean much to them. So you'll want to work with your representative, your manufacturer's rep, on the best way to go about getting your order submitted. Sometimes it's not the way that you want it to be done. When it comes to frames, we've covered everything that comes to the top of my head. The next definition is frame clearance. That's probably going to have everything to do with the clearance under the door to the top of what's immediately below the bottom of the door. Bottom of the door to what's ever immediately below it. That dimension is your clearance. So let's move on to frame clearance. Thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up. Please subscribe and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.